Good afternoon, everyone. And you'll excuse, I'm sitting in my car with my dog behind me. We try to get back to some normalcy when you leave the legislature, and I had a DMV and a vet appointment, and here I am in my car. So trying to get some stuff done. But I'm sure do appreciate everyone joining us post legislative session, since we have to come back to actually sine die. But I just wanted to go over what my thoughts were for the legislature quickly. We had a really, really unique opportunity to be able to do a tremendous amount of good work as it pertains to infrastructure and property tax relief, grocery tax relief, any number of things, broadband, the stuff that people had asked us to do when we came here. And the disappointment is right out of the gates. $600 million was spent on a income tax relief, and we knew then when we spoke to you that it was likely an indication that they probably weren't going to do anything meaningful in the other arenas that all Idahoans have asked us to do, something that benefits the most of our citizenry, and that is property tax relief and grocery tax relief, and to do better roads and bridges and water and sewer and all of those things with the growth and the antiquated systems that all needed to be addressed. We did a very poor amount of relief as it pertains to property tax relief. We did sort of embedded things in some of the legislation that gives some relief. And then we gave only $20 in grocery tax relief that won't happen until 2024, and $20 with today's groceries and waiting till the end of the year just really doesn't give people much of the relief that we had hoped for. So it was blessedly not a long session, but unfortunately we didn't get a lot accomplished. It was the responsibility of the Senate to make sure that much of that came over from the House that was mostly political grandstanding didn't gain any traction, which is what usually happens. Unfortunately, these are done on purpose so that people can say that they got something printed and got it out of one body, and then they can go after the senators in an election cycle when something doesn't get considered on the Senate side. And you all have seen that for the past few years quite a bit. On a good note, we did get quite a few pieces of legislation done that we are to be proud of. Senator Wintrow had that tenant bill, which would erase a lot of discriminatory language out of the tenant contracts, which is long overdue and overlooked. So happy that that was well received in both houses. I had an essential caregiver bill, which helps people be able to accompany a patient or resident now so that they can be their patient advocate on healthcare issues. That also was overwhelmingly passed by both houses. We did do a few well-intentioned, good voter bills, not voter suppression bills, much of which we did manage to stop. Some did get through, but a couple of them is making sure that whoever is registered to run for office actually lives in the district that they are filing in. And there was a lot of abuse on people getting homeowners exemptions. There were some that were getting multiple homeowners exemptions in the state, some who didn't even live in the state. And there was no central database for the clerks to be able to find out whether someone had already claimed a homeowners exemption in another county. And so now they can go through the tax commission and make sure that there isn't duplication and have people stop gaming the system. It's disappointing that we didn't get as much for infrastructure as we had hoped for, but we did get some, mostly ARPA money that came from the federal government, and it did go to road projects, some of it in the schools. But I have to say that, and a little bit to broadband, that much of that is still being worked on and will be appropriated for the next couple of years going forward. But we had, and I'm sure Alana will talk about it, some real attacks on marginalized populations within Idaho, which is extraordinarily disappointing. And we want to be better than we are for being a welcoming state. And anyway, and then as a final note, I just wanted to say that we should have spent more on education, which I think Alana will probably address. And that was my last legislative session. So been such an honor to have served the people in my district and the state and to be able to speak to all of you. I will be in office, of course, until the end of November, but it has been an extraordinary experience, a challenging one, but so pleased to have had the opportunity. And I will pass this along to Alana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator. And thank you all again for joining us today. We had hoped it would be a sine die, a post sine die press conference, but we're hopefully getting really close to that. But I have to say, as I sit here, I'm still reeling from last week's horrific display on the House floor, culminating in a post-midnight session on Friday night. Last week, we saw a member distribute an email, as many of you know, from a librarian who understandably was opposing efforts to subject librarians to jail time should someone find they'd permitted access to material deemed harmful. And we saw legislators explicitly attack those librarians, attack Idaho citizens for exercising their constitutional right to petition the government for redress, a core First Amendment right, and demand that they be punished through their budget. And then we saw that budget gutted, nearly $4 million taken out of a Commission on Libraries budget that was only $11 million to begin with. And I hope this doesn't seem like a small thing, but I call it out because I think it's a big thing. I think it reflects a problem that goes far beyond library funding, and if normalized would undermine our very form of government. We cannot allow citizens to be punished for speaking out on legislation that impacts them. It is an utterly unacceptable tactic that unfortunately prevailed and carried the day here, as we see a library budget that is now a fraction of what was proposed. But I'm also highlighting this incident because it marks the culmination of a very dangerous trend we've seen in this body. We have a House GOP caucus that has truly lost its way from conservative small government. That caucus now prefers to fixate on imaginary divisive social issues that are ginned up on Fox News, and they focus on those to the near exclusion of the very real issues that actually face Idahoans. Issues like lack of affordable housing, skyrocketing property taxes, lack of affordable childcare, direly underfunded education systems, and teacher recruitment problems. And far from advocating for traditional conservative values like local control or a government that stays out of people's business, this Idaho House GO caucus now veers toward command and control regulation of everything from the bedroom to the boardroom. And they seek vengeance upon anyone that interferes with that quest for power. Now, going back a little bit, when Medicaid expansion passed a few years ago through a ballot initiative that defied the wishes of the GOP supermajority, we saw then a vengeful GOP caucus that was bent on eradicating those ballot initiative rights. When the Idaho Supreme Court protected those rights, once again thwarting the will of this GOP supermajority, we saw them this session seek vengeance against the Supreme Court, ramrodding House Bill 782 through to substantially undermine the independence of the judiciary. Of course, we fervently hope the governor will veto this 11th hour heist of the judicial branch. But we have seen this very disturbing trend that's been building over years, and I think it reached fever pitch this year. This quest for power and a quest to punish anybody that stands in the way of that hunger for power. But I think the public really needs to know that at least in the House, I don't think the Senate has progressed this far, but in the House, the party of small government, the party of Reagan and Eisenhower is gone. Observe a moment of silence because it is gone. The Idaho GOP today in the House wants to dictate what books your kids can read, what medical care you're allowed to give your children, what women can do with their bodies, what medical care they can seek, what private businesses are allowed to invest their own money in, how private employers are allowed to make their own employment decisions, what local governments are allowed to name their own streets and parks and monuments, what policies local governments are allowed to adopt in their own communities. In the span of a week this session, House Republicans passed bills to criminalize librarians, to make felons out of parents for seeking medically recommended treatment for their transgender children, and a Texas-style abortion ban, which turns women's family members into paid informants. And while the hunger for control and domination is certainly on the rise in the Idaho House Majority Caucus, there is very little interest in much of that caucus in actually doing the work of governing. More than ever, Democrats were critical this session to the basic functioning of this state. I'm going to give you a long list now. The Department of Public Health, the Supreme Court, full-day kindergarten, affordable workforce housing, the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, Commission on Aging, Division of Human Resources, Division of Financial Management, the Attorney General's Office, Child Care Assistance, Developmental Disabilities Council, Commission on the Arts, the Domestic Violence Council, the Workforce Development Council, the Office of Species Conservation, and more. I'll stop there because I'm sure you have other things to do today. All of these are items on which the majority of House Republicans voted against the budgets. They voted against the budgets for all of these critical agencies and services, which were only saved because every Democrat voted in support. And frankly, if we'd had 2 more seats, we could have saved the original library's budget too. I'm very proud of our caucus and what they were able to achieve against all odds, despite our small number. Senator Stennett spoke of the Democrats' success in the Senate, and I'd like to share some wins in the House. Beyond saving a bulk of the vital services of the state, as I just enumerated. After 5 years of hard work, Representative Sally Toon saw her badly needed incentive program for teachers to go work in rural and underserved areas finally signed into law. Representative Mathias ensured that the children of service members who die in the line of duty have access to free higher education in Idaho. Representative Green passed the Dig Once bill, ensuring that broadband is installed throughout the state in the most efficient and cost-effective way possible. Senator Nelson and I saw the OPE report describing the dire state of rural emergency medical services, and we did something about it. We passed legislation to bring funding for training and other costs associated with emergency medical services across the state. Many members of our caucus, including Representative Nash, myself, Senator Ward Engelking, and others, have been working for years to bring full-day kindergarten to Idaho, and we were thrilled that that finally happened. We had many other excellent ideas that unfortunately were blocked, including numerous property tax relief bills, restoring the indexed homeowners exemption, allowing impact fees to be collected for school construction, allocating the internet sales tax to local government to allow direct property tax relief, and more. It was extremely frustrating to hear the drumbeat from our constituents for years now that they need property tax relief and they need it now. And we had a slate of excellent and practical ideas to deliver that relief, but we were blocked, as we have been year in, year out, by the GOP supermajority that puts our bills in drawers and is bent on allocating every penny to top margin income tax cuts that overwhelmingly help the wealthiest and most profitable corporations. Senator Stennett referenced that coming out of the gate with a $600 million tax cut, there are an almost infinite number of ways that you could do a $600 million tax cut, but there is almost no way that would get less money to the people that need it than the way they elected to proceed, with doling out almost all of the money to the wealthiest people and the most profitable corporations in the state. We certainly hope that mistake does not happen again next year and in future years. But again, I'm extremely proud of our caucus, who remain laser focused on delivering real solutions to problems that actually exist. And thanks to that commitment to that real and helpful policy, there were some meaningful wins for the people of Idaho this session, such as workforce housing and full-day kindergarten and investment in childcare and infrastructure. These are solutions that the public will genuinely benefit from in education, safety, infrastructure, and more. And of course, by saving the budgets for innumerable agencies, we were absolutely instrumental in keeping the ship of state afloat. We remain committed to advancing the well-being of all Idahoans and to working across the aisle to ensure that we are providing top quality educational opportunities, public safety, healthcare access, affordable housing, and reliable infrastructure, all while safeguarding the freedoms and rights we enjoy. We will see large turnover this election cycle, and we sincerely hope that next January brings us a legislature that is interested in bipartisan productive governance. And finally, since this is my last chance to do this with Senator Stennett, I want to say what an honor it has been to serve alongside her. Senator Stennett, you will be missed deeply. She is the consummate public servant and has blessed us with her wisdom, good cheer, common sense, and extraordinary work ethic. It will take many years to rebuild the institutional knowledge that she takes away with her, and I'm not sure we'll ever be able to do so. But I thank her from the bottom of my heart for her service here. And with that, we want to open it up to your
Thank
questions.
you, Representative Rubel. I so appreciate that. Thank you. it's with mixed feelings, but and just been such an honor to serve with you. And I know it'll go in good hands. I did want to add too that a couple of things to maybe talk about is last year there was a real push to try to take the power away from the governor. This year, the push was to take the power away from the judiciary. And there was a real concerted effort to try to undermine nurses and doctors, the way they changed the WWAMI program, and not allow for rural veterinarians. And these are things that are going to come back and haunt us because we are growing. We have the least amount of any of these providers per capita in the country. And I'm hoping that when the legislature reconvenes next year, they take it seriously, that we need good medical care in all fronts, and that we are 3 equal branches of government, not just the legislative branch, as we do our policy making. So I just wanted to add that, and thanks for questions.
Okay, so we'll open it up to questions, and feel free to use the raise your hand function or write in the chat as Betsy and Kevin had done. And so I'm going to first turn it over to Betsy and then Kevin, and then as more folks have questions, feel free to let us know.
Thank you. This is Betsy Russell with the Idaho Press. I have a question about the announcement from the Senate Republican caucus over the weekend that they've reached an agreement with the House leadership to form a joint working group to look into objectionable materials, sexually explicit materials in Idaho libraries. And I did speak with Senator Winder about that this morning. And it sounds like this is going to join with the effort that the House had passed a resolution for. And he did tell me that there would be a minority member appointed from each house, along with 3 majority members and ex officio representation from the Commission for Libraries and the Idaho Library Association. I'm interested in what both of your thoughts are on the formation of that joint working group.
Well, I guess I'm not, I have yet to be convinced that we really are facing the crisis of porn in our libraries that one would think based on, some of the things that have been said on the House floor. But, my understanding is that some of the items that were flagged were actually in the adults section. And I don't think it's reasonable for us to purge libraries of all adult material. I think, I haven't been convinced that there's a crisis. But if it gets people settled down to the point where they're willing to fund libraries in the future, I guess it's maybe something we have to do to get those votes for money in the future. I certainly hope that there will be sufficient representation and discussion on this commission, on this working group, that there is minimal damage done, and that in fact we still have informative libraries that have a broad array of educational materials in them. And I think probably that should include some materials about anatomy and basic biology. And I think it would be unfortunate if what emerges from this is a purging of all scientifically accurate material. Oh, I think, Michelle, you're muted.
I think it's censorship. And unfortunately, like Representative Rubel said, if it's a way for us to continue to be able to fund our libraries and go forward with better policy than what we saw this year, some of that will probably, as a mediation, need to happen, though I think it's unnecessary, as Representative Rubel said. Unfortunately, I think what we should have been saying is if parents want to have certain content for their children, they should be responsible and do the oversight, not the librarians. It's not the librarian's job. Much of the content they spoke about, as Representative Rubel mentioned, is in the adult section. And if the parents aren't taking care of their children's teaching and learning in the library sector, they can't be blaming other people for, they just don't allow small children to go wandering into the adult content. But that aside, I will be assigning a minority member to be on the council, as I'm sure Representative Rubel will be, to be part of that task force or working group, and make sure that we are firm about how we head into the future as it pertains to libraries, their content, and how they function. They are an integral part of the learning sector for particularly those that don't get much books and so on in the home environment. They oftentimes go to a library to get resources, to do their education. I think it's extraordinarily unfortunate that we have put them in the crosshairs when they do such great work for our communities.
So we're going to go Kevin and then Ruth Brown.
Okay, thank you. This is Kevin Richert with Idaho Education News, and I wanted to kind of follow up on the questions on libraries, but focus a little bit now on education, because relative to what we've seen the past few days on libraries, education initiatives pass fairly easily, whether we're talking about pay raises for teachers or bonuses for school employees, for school insurance. Even the higher education budget passed the House fairly easily this time around, the first time around. How do you account for the way education fared this legislative session versus libraries or other programs?
Well, I can only speculate, and I'll let, I'd be very curious to hear Senator Stennett's take on this. Well, I guess in the Senate, they don't tend to have the, the drag down fights over budgets necessarily that we have in the House. It's always a little bit more of a nail biter in the House as to whether anything will end up funded. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how the higher education budget went. Now, they got their pound of flesh on that one too, remember, because they forced BSU to drain their rainy day funds by $4 million in order to get their budget through. So they were not given kind of a clean, here's the amount of money you need and go on your way. It was kind of a go drain down your rainy day funds, even though we have a record year of funds on the bottom line. But with that hit, if you will, to their rainy day funds, then that budget did go through. I was very pleased at how solidly the bill passed to get teachers onto the state health insurance plan. That was really good. It was you just can never predict in any given year what words salad is going to emerge as the social hysteria point du jour. I could not have predicted heading into last year. Last year, I thought we'd be worrying about property taxes, and instead it was CRT. And the year before that, it was all worried about diversity programs in schools. And this year it was ESG and libraries. Somewhere out there, there's a boiler room that gins up these issues, and I wish I knew where it was, but I can't predict what they're going to churn up in any given year. But this year, that's what they came up with. They decided to get everybody whipped into a frenzy about smut in libraries and ESG, or environmental social governance standards in corporations. I think it came from a national narrative. I think it was coming out of Glenn Beck and Fox News and things that are outside of our control here. I think that's what's happening. There's an externally driven narrative that is just dumped on us here in Idaho, and they take the bait every time, and it takes over the narrative in the Idaho legislature instead of real Idaho issues. I fear it will continue happening until the people of Idaho demand accountability for it and demand that we actually take their real concerns and problems into account.
I found that even though we were capable of passing budgets, it was extraordinarily stingy. If you think about how much we had in the billions of dollars at our disposal to make sure we came in from last year having underfunded them, we still are underfunding our public education system. That didn't improve, though we didn't blow up the budgets this time, but it still is at a deficit. It's hard, particularly for our universities to with the budgets they have, to continue to operate. I think that even though we said we got kindergarten, we didn't even say kindergarten in the bill. And at some point, if we don't properly fund it and put it into statute, then we are going to, a couple of years from now, say, oh, well, it's not in statute, and therefore we can just pretend like we don't want kindergarten anymore. It is a strategic way of blowing up public education in my mind. And I think that there is a lot of work ahead. We still are 49th in the nation on how we maintain our school facilities, which is something that is a matter of safety for our school children, which needs much attention, which I don't think that I think there was some given, but not nearly enough to meet the need or to make all of our schools safe. So there is much work ahead. I'm just glad we didn't drag it down any more than we did last year, but we didn't move it ahead or forward as much as it should have.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Hi there, Ruth Brown with Idaho Public Television. I appreciate your time today. I have a question about the Judicial Council changes. As you well know, the Supreme Court has pushed back regarding legislation, most recently ballot initiatives, but that's common in states, I think, for the branches of government to challenge each other. What do you have any insight as into why now? Why make changes to the Judicial Council now?
It's interesting because early on, I had mentioned we had a luncheon with the judges, the Supreme Court judges, and I had a sense a couple months ago that they were going to go after the judiciary. And I'm not exactly sure why, except that it is to this constant empowerment of the legislative branch over the other branches. And I think what is odd about the Judicial Council bill is it gave so much power to the governor. And all last year we were trying to take power away from the governor, but for him to be able to determine who's on the council and have less citizenry on it is a terrible direction to go. And it is a system that has worked for decades and decades just fine. And to take more citizenry out of it, one position away, and add the power to the governor in picking the Judicial Council mystifies me. I don't know what the end game is in that, but it is an assertion of two other branches of government over the judiciary.
And I mean, again, I would chalk this up in the vengeance category. I think they were mad that the Supreme Court struck down Senate Bill 1110 on ballot initiatives. I think there were some, I'm going on rumors here, so I've got to give the full hearsay disclosure, but I think there were some that were angry that Senator Davis was not selected for the last opening on the Supreme Court. I think there were also some that were angry that the court upheld the redistricting maps. And so I think there was an interest in, I think there are some that are not appreciating the fact that our judiciary is an independent branch that serves as a check and balance. I think they would like a judiciary that serves more as a rubber stamp. And they see the Judicial Council as an avenue to do this. Now, again, procedurally, I think what they're doing is very dangerous. So this is a system, as Senator Sennett said, that has worked very well for 55 years. And they're proposing a cataclysmic change in how members of the judiciary are selected and turning it into a very highly politicized process away from the nonpartisan independent process that it's been for more than half a century. And this is a pattern that we've seen. I think we saw it with House Bill 389 last year, when they have a bill that they know is probably not going to hold up to the light of day and would probably get a lot of pushback through a traditional legislative process. They do this legislation by heist, where they bring it in less 72 hours of session, they suspend all the rules and they jam it through before anybody can really see what's happening. And before people really have an opportunity to come in and weigh in, and before we have a chance to have a balanced and reasoned discussion about the bill. They did that with 389 because last year, the property tax bill, because they knew if they had a fulsome process, 100 people would show up screaming and complaining about it. So instead, they suspended all the rules and jammed it through in 48 hours. That's what they're doing with the Judicial Council bill. They waited till the very tail end of session. It was less than 48 hours between the first time anybody even saw the bill brought in for the first time in Ways and Means to when it had flown through the House. And I had attorney friends all over the state who were, on vacation, who were calling like, what is going on with the Judicial Council? I'm out of town. What? Help. They had no chance to weigh in because it was greased so fast, because I think people knew this was not going to be a popular bill. I think most people don't want a highly politicized judiciary. I think most people, took their civics way back when and appreciate the benefits of three equally powerful branches of government, and this undermines that. So our faith is in the governor now that he will hopefully protect that system. But I think it was an attempt to politicize, and I think it was an attempt to get vengeance on the Supreme Court for not doing the bidding of the supermajority.
It'll be interesting to see whether the governor will veto a bill that gives him more power. But it is the wrong thing to do, and I'm not sure what the governor will do with it. But this also happened this year again with the Attorney General's office. They don't like that the Attorney General is following the Idaho Constitution, and so they keep trying to bring money, wasting taxpayer dollars by hiring outside lawyers at much higher rates so they can get the answer they want, not to follow constitutional guidance. And so it then in the latter part of this session, we did see again a bill that went through very easily on taking the Attorney General out of the litigation as it pertains to the Idaho Department of Lands. And he's on the land board. And there are many moving parts in the Department of Lands where you need expertise in so many different varied areas, whether it's fire suppression or real estate or timber or whatever it is. And to go and hire outside lawyers for all those very specific expertise is going to be extraordinarily expensive. But they didn't like what they were hearing. They didn't like the Attorney General. They wanted to neuter him on the land board. And all you're doing then is bowing to the industry didn't like the answer, or the legislature didn't like the answer, and instead of following the law. So this is something that just keeps happening again and again with the legislative branch of trying to take over and be more powerful and have everybody do their bidding instead of doing what is constitutionally accurate.
I'm so glad you raised that, Senator Stennett, because exactly as we're connecting the dots, it is a very big part of that picture is these punitive measures that we've seen taken against the Attorney General in recent years, because he hasn't been doing the bidding of the supermajority. And so, punishment is being doled out. It's a recurring pattern that we're seeing in all facets of government right now in Idaho.
And we have a question from Elise in the chat. She asked, this session, the legislature saw attempts at property tax relief, but none were successful. Moving forward, are there plans to propose future legislation that could garner bipartisan support?
We have a lot of proposals that have a lot of bipartisan support. In fact, Representative Skog, I think every Democrat co-sponsored his bill last year to basically restore the indexed homeowners exemption. I think that bill had 59 legislative co-sponsors. So very bipartisan, but was nevertheless denied a hearing. We had bipartisan support on all kinds of things, on giving local government their share of the internet sales tax, which would be just about dollar for dollar property tax relief. We had bipartisan support on impact fees for school construction. We have bipartisan support on all this stuff, on just the clean, we had bipartisan support on a clean increase in the circuit breaker, unlike what they did and kicking low-income people off the circuit breaker to pay for the increase in amount. It's all a chairman problem. It's all that the chairman wouldn't give them a hearing. So there will be a different chairman next year in House Revenue and Taxation. Now, I think a lot of these, Representative Moyle was, working behind the scenes to block as well. So even with a different chairman, we may still run into trouble. But there are many solutions out there that would deliver very meaningful relief while keeping vital services intact, because that was some of the problem we had this year. Was there were bills that were allowed to move forward, but they all came at the expense of defunding the police and defunding fire. And that's something that causes a lot of people, including myself, heartburn. That is not the way to deliver property tax relief. But there are very responsible, very bipartisan solutions that if we can just get a chairman to let us have a hearing, I think would have a very strong chance of reaching the finish line.
You would find, and you probably noticed, that nearly everything that was meaningful that one body would do, the other body would do an equal bill. So there were competing bills both in the House and the Senate for the exact same content. And as the circuit breaker is a classic example, we heard from all our local governments that because of what we did last year, thousands of people fell through the cracks for the being eligible for circuit breaker. And those are our seniors and veterans and people with disabilities and lower income folks. And the local government said you have to do 200% in order to reclaim all those people back. And so the Senate did a 200% and the House only did 150%. And then when we had a really good idea in the Senate, we would pass it out of the Senate, send it to the House, and they would change a few words on it, put a House bill number on it, and send it back to us because they wanted to claim success on it being a House bill. I mean, the nonsense and the time it took for doing duplicate legislation in both houses was pretty staggering this year, more than I've ever seen.
And then Blake Jones has a question.
Hi, I'm Blake Jones with Idaho Education News. Representative Rubel, you actually answered my initial question already. I was going to ask what the sticking point has been this session over trying to allow schools to collect impact fees. But, to follow up on that, I'm wondering with a new committee chairman potentially coming in. Do you have any kind of prominent Republican allies there who you think will be able to help you get that kind of legislation passed in the future? And, if so, how much of a priority will that be in 2023?
Well, certainly, and we're going to get, I've heard tell possibly up to 40 new members. So, some of our past allies may no longer be around on this, but certainly Representative Skog has shown strong interest in working with us. Representative Furness, former Representative Gerald Raymond, who I know is running to come back to the seat that he previously occupied. And I'm hopeful others. I can't imagine we're the only people who are hearing from their constituents that they want property tax relief. I think that's a near universal chant across the state. So I'm optimistic with the new batch that there will be newcomers that are going to be interested in working on this with us too.
I think we've answered all the questions that were put in the chat. Does anyone else want to ask anything?
Did I see Betsy had a question, or did she already ask?
I already asked.
All right.
Okay, well, if that is all the questions we have, we will go ahead and close down. Thank you again for joining us. And if you do think of anything, just shoot me an email and we will get that answered for you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thanks.
Thanks for everything. Have a great week.